Hello, my name is Grant Henry. I'm back at it again with another episode, another edition of these Tennessee legislative updates. Today, the topic is civil asset forfeiture. And for those of you that don't know me, don't know Grant Henry, some of you may have known me from being the grassroots guy with Americans for Prosperity the last couple of years. Others of you may know me from talk radio. Still, some may know me as the president of a new nonprofit called Biblically Conservative. But my new day job is the legislative director for an organization called Free Tennessee. I'm up there as a full-time lobbyist in Tennessee with a few folks underneath me. We're lobbying for just good general liberty principles. Just trying to bring freedom back to the state of Tennessee as much as we can, anyway. And I'll stop doing that little introduction there once people get more up to speed with what these new episodes are, maybe on the new social media channels. But there you go. As I said before, the topic at hand today is civil asset forfeiture. And I know, I get it, a lot of you, your eyes are already glossing over because, Grant, we've spoken about this with you 6 or 7 years now, and other people have been working on this issue in the state of Tennessee for literal decades. And I understand. It's a complex issue, but it's one that needs to be addressed, and it's one that has massive, mega updates coming this year in particular, which we will get to. But for those that don't know, civil asset forfeiture is the practice that allows police to basically take your stuff without charging you with a crime. I know that sounds nuts, but it literally allows police to seize and forfeit your property over to the state, meaning over to government or over to the police here in Tennessee. It allows them to take your stuff, forfeit it over to police without actually convicting you of a crime. And if you want to follow along some of the notes here, any description you're watching this in, the video description, either on YouTube or Facebook, if it's here or over there, or wherever it is, it doesn't matter. Click on that Evernote link and you'll take yourself to this stuff right here, and we can read along with some of this stuff. Now, as we said before, civil asset forfeiture is the process that allows police to take your stuff without ever actually charging you with the crime. And oddly enough, the legal proceeding, it's actually brought against the seized property, not against the individual, meaning they take your property, they charge your property with, for lack of a better term, the commission of a crime, and not actually charging you with it. The property goes through an entirely different portion of the legal system, through the civil portion of the legal system. And for innocent people, getting this stuff back is notoriously difficult and long and expensive. And just to set the stage here for some people that may be stumbling across this channel for the first time, some of these new social media pages for the first time, or even the process known as civil asset forfeiture, here's what Justice Clarance Thomas said, arguably the most conservative or at least contextualist or originalist justice we have left on the Supreme Court now. He said, this system, where police can seize property with limited judicial oversight and retain it for their own use, has led to egregious and well-chronicled abuses. This threatens Tennesseans' property and due process rights. Those are my words right there. But he goes on to say, and it frequently targets the poor and other groups least able to defend themselves and defend their interest in forfeiture proceedings. So you understand the stage we have set here now, right? We have this process known as civil asset forfeiture, where somebody's taking your stuff, not actually charging you with a crime. And I have no problem. Nobody has any problem. Charge me with a crime and take the stuff. That's called criminal forfeiture. Take my stuff and charge me with a crime. That's fine. Convict me of a crime. Take all the stuff you want to. But I want to give you guys a quick rundown here as to what this process actually looks like. Now, let me give you a quick, so you can see where I'm getting to this. If you click here for a deep dive of the civil asset forfeiture problem in Tennessee, you'll get to this document here. So the civil rights implications of Tennessee civil asset forfeiture laws and practices. This was done in February 2018. And one of the portions of that is actually coming from an attorney called Frank Lanham. I think I'm pronouncing that name correctly. If not, I'm sorry, Frank. But let me just read a portion of where his testimony came from here. Is the hearing before the Tennessee State Advisory Committee to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. This is in July 24th of 2017. Listen to what this attorney says as far as the process of civil asset forfeiture in Tennessee is concerned, and you'll start to understand why I have such a heart for this issue. He's a criminal defense attorney representing clients who seek to get their stuff back, and he believes that the civil forfeiture process is at base unfair. He explained that the current process by comparing it to our current criminal justice system, which this attorney says is pretty good, meaning the current criminal justice system is pretty good. So if you were convicted or charged of a crime, go through the criminal justice system, and that's all pretty good. Because in the criminal justice system in Tennessee, there's a process that makes sense. There's a clerk of the court of every county in the state of Tennessee. The clerk receives your files and your papers. The state legislature tells them what to charge. The matter goes before an independent judge and then an appellate judge who are elected or appointed by the process that we have. And then we have prosecutors' offices who actually charge crimes and they prosecute these individuals. There's an entire system at play here that tends to make sense, that protects your rights. Let me refocus this camera. I jump around, I get excited, and we get all out of focus. Now he goes on to say this. This, he says, is in contrast to the civil asset forfeiture process. He noted that here, when law enforcement get to your home in the civil asset forfeiture process, again, when they get to your home in this process, they are allowed to take everything you own without a search warrant. He told the committee that of a case where he had actually defended the people. He said where law enforcement took from a family's home all of its electronics, including the children's Game Boys and PS4s, all of their cars and money, and even busted one of the child's piggy banks containing $147. You need that $147, don't you? They did this all without a warrant. And he noted that under the law, they can also seize a person's bank accounts, leaving the people with no ability to pay rent or electric bills, or possibly most importantly in a case like this, attorney's fees to go fight this in court. Now, again, if you charge these people and convict them of crimes, do all this stuff you want to. I mean, I don't care. I mean, maybe you shouldn't take the kid's piggy bank, but what are you going to do with a PS4, right? But whatever. Convict these people of a crime and then take all the stuff you want to. But here it gets worse. He says once the seizure has been completed, he explained that a person is handed a green piece of paper that says, hey, here's why we're taking your property, with a check on a marked box that basically just says narcotics. Maybe there were narcotics. I mean, maybe there were narcotics. Maybe they found narcotics, and that's fine. Find the narcotics, take the stuff, keep the stuff if you want to. But he noted that there was a lack of specificity to these allegations, adding that, that's it. You don't get that you sold narcotics last week. You don't get the idea that like you sold narcotics today. They don't indicate that we have evidence of you selling narcotics at such and such time to such and such person. We think that you're moving heroin. None of that matters. None of that's specified. They just hand you this little green piece of paper that has the word check narcotics on it. He says it's usually at this point that he's hired to provide legal services to assist in getting the property back. But part of the problem here is that Tennesseans owe a $350 bond to even have your day in court. And sometimes this $350 bond is charged per item seized. So he says, for instance, if 3 cars were taken from a client at different times, the opponent might say, have 3 bonds that are required for $1,050 total in those bonds. So per item seized, $350, you might have to pay over $1,000 just to get your day in court. Then you have attorney's fees after that. Then you have court costs and all the other kinds of stuff. Now, this paragraph in particular is extremely interesting to read through. I would have highly advised, if you all have the time, read through this. He starts to compare the process of what we have to call these administrative hearing processes, which is nothing like the criminal justice system we have now. I mean, it's much worse. It's this weird incestuous overlap of a bunch of sort of like backdoor deals, and you can only go to a couple courts in the entire states to get your case heard, and you can only appeal within a certain amount of time, and even when you do appeal, it stays within the same person of a prosecutor that you just appealed to, and it's all nonsense. Now he goes on down here saying that at one point he reported that he had a 90-year-old client who asked the government to return his truck. His grandson had been driving it around, and apparently there was marijuana that was found inside this 90-year-old's truck. So you understand the situation. The 90-year-old's grandson took the 90-year-old's truck and then drove around, and then he probably got pulled over with marijuana at some point. So take that marijuana, charge that kid with a crime, put him in jail, do whatever you want to do. But the car itself belonged to somebody else. And he was trying to get his car back. And the response that this 90-year-old received was, the response that this attorney received on behalf of the 90-year-old was, tell this 90-year-old man that if he doesn't want to wait 120 days for a hearing, he better pay me $500. The grandfather needed a truck, so he paid him $500. He goes on to say here that, he was representing another person who was stopped with $18,000 in his possession. And eventually what will happen sometimes when you find these type of people, let me get this on here. Here we go. What will happen when you have these things, somebody's found with $18,000 on their person, whatever. Here's testimony from Julie Warren. She describes a little bit about who Julie Warren is. She's the state director for Tennessee and Kentucky Riding Crime. Great person. I know Julie personally. She's incredible, highly qualified, knows what she's talking about. She expressed concern not only for this $350 bond, but back to that other story when that trucker got $18,000 taken away. Listen to what this person says here. Julie Warren says, next, when the claimant finally gets to appear for their hearing, they're then pitted against a prosecutor with the Department of Safety and the seizing law enforcement officer to negotiate a settlement. Meaning they took $18,000 from you, and before they actually convict you of a crime, they'll bring you in there. And a lot of the time, I don't have stats on this. I don't have numbers how often this happens because we don't have reporting data on this as far as I know. But a lot of the times you'll come in there, them having taken $18,000, and they'll say, hey, if you really don't want to go forward, if you don't want to wait, the months, if not years it might take for you to get your stuff back, let us keep about $10,000 of this, why don't you? We'll hold on to $10,000 of this, and then we'll give you back the other $8,000. No, that's not good. Well, let's negotiate it down to 7 or 5 or whatever they're going to do. And part of the reason they want to do this is because what Frank brought up here in just a second. Let me find this again. As he was leaving, this person who had their $18,000 taken, Mr. Landis saw several men from this county drug task force that were accompanied by a fourth person that they wanted to hire. So the $18,000 would fund his position. You see, that's what happens here. After the individuals from the task force spoke to Department of Safety DOS prosecutor, Mr. Lamon, meaning the attorney, was asked if his client would forego the $18,000 in exchange for never going to jail. That is a legitimate negotiation that happened with an attorney. On paper, on record, they said, hey, would you just give up this $18,000, not fight us on the $18,000? And I guess there was some exchange saying that we won't fight you on the criminal charges. This is nuts. This is nutty behavior. This is Banana Republic style stuff. The attorney stated that he believes that there is a profit motive in civil asset forfeiture. And here's part of the big problem, okay? This account right here, the $18,000 would fund his position. What happens to this money in the state of Tennessee is when the individual police precincts, so that individual precinct or that individual officer or whatever, when they take that money, let's say it's not money, let's say it's a car. They take that car and they sell that car off later on. The money from that sales proceeds goes back to the precinct that did the seizing. And they can then use that money to fund drug task force. This is one of the biggest problems going on right now. And the claim that I want to make today, let's fund the police properly. Hashtag fund the police, right? You've just understood the process of what happens when your stuff is taken, that you're not charged with a crime. These things that the people have to go through, the lack of transparency, the terrible process of happens in the judicial system or lack thereof a judicial system, the weird negotiations that happen behind the scenes. And then ultimately falling upon the idea that $18,000 might fund another position in a drug task force. I'm here today to say, counties of Tennessee, sheriff's departments of Tennessee, police of Tennessee, if you need the money, let's fund the police. Hashtag fund the police. Let's fund them through a transparent budget process and stop having to rely upon things like this. Refocus the camera. We don't need to put our law enforcement officers in a position where they might even have to think about doing something like this. What a terrible position to put them in. All right, so here's some of the major updates. Now that everyone's up to speed, it took me 13 minutes to do that, sorry y'all, but now that everyone's up to speed as to what civil asset forfeiture is, what's happening in the state of Tennessee, why we need to fund the police, get back to that defund the police, fund the police through a transparent budget process, here's a major update from the Lee administration, all right? And this is going to get us into an entirely separate thing, but you're going to have to let me go on a rant here. We're going to get into a totally new conversation here in just a second that has nothing to do with civil asset forfeiture, yet it also does. So apparently Governor Lee has given word that no agency or State Department will work against civil asset forfeiture bills this year. And I cannot tell you how much of a massive win that is. Somebody in the Lee administration, maybe Governor Lee himself, has become at least somewhat supportive of the idea of civil asset forfeiture, has been given indication down that nobody in these state agencies or state departments will work against civil asset forfeiture. Now, if you don't know why that's so important, give me 2 more minutes, I'll explain. This means that we will not have to fight Department of Safety every step of the way in these subcommittees and committees. Now, we still will have to consider the input of, say, the local DAs and police and sheriffs, but not having to fight against state-run agencies and state-run taxpayer-funded lobbyists, that is a massive win. Now, some of y'all just picked up on the term that I just used there, taxpayer-funded lobbyists. That's the separate issue that's going on inside of the civil asset forfeiture issue, and this is why you come back to channels like this to get the inside knowledge. Did any of you know that in the state of Tennessee, there are tons of taxpayer-funded lobbyists up there operating all the time? I'm sure some of you are saying, yes, I knew that for sure. But a lot of you are saying right now, no, I don't even know what that means. Okay, so a guy like me, I'm a registered lobbyist in the state of Tennessee. I have been for several years. I go up there and I lobby on the behalf of, general interests that I think are good liberty-loving interests. But you all don't pay me for that. A group of individuals somewhere else does. A company pays me for that. When I was with Americans for Prosperity was paying me to do that. When I'm with Free Tennessee is paying me to do that. You all, the taxpayers of Tennessee, do not pay me to go up there and lobby either for or against your bills. But dozens and dozens of people are paid by you and I that are lobbying each and every day for or against bills that may or may not be in our best interest. You understand how confusing that could be? There's dozens of people up there that are lobbying every single day on behalf of departments that might be lobbying for something that you like, or they might be lobbying against something you like. But the point is that these lobbyists are there on behalf of particular departments that they represent, not you, and we're paying them to do it. Let's say you have a bill that you really like I do. Maybe someone in the Department of Safety doesn't really like that bill. Well, they just send down their lobbyists to meet with all the legislators and give testimony in committee to work against the bill that you hope might pass. And here's the big point. Regardless of whether you agree with the position of that particular governmental department or not, doesn't even matter. That's not the point. The point is that we are paying the salary of those people, and those people are not elected. Moreover, most of the time, these taxpayer-funded lobbyists and department representatives, the lobbyists are the most influential people in the building. Their word is gospel truth most of the time. I kid you not. Go watch these people operate in subcommittee. Man, some of these taxpayer-funded lobbyists are the sharpest people in the building. They are intimidating. They know their stuff. They work harder than anybody else up there. And whatever they say, the subcommittee is just going to go with. They're just going to go with. And the other interesting thing here is that a lot of the times these taxpayer-funded lobbyists are working to spend more of your money. So we have this double overlap, right? We're paying them to be there, and they're also working to get more money for their departments, which means they're going to charge us more in taxes or something later on. I don't know how they're going to do it, but they're going to have to figure out a way to get more money. So we're having a double money overlap of I'm paying you money to charge me more money. You get what I'm saying? You see why this is such a problem? Let me put it this way again. Someone that is not a representative of the people has far more influence over your representatives than you do. And that fact by itself is not crazy. Ford has lobbyists up there that have way more power over the legislators than you might. The Hospital Association has lobbyists up there that may have way more power over the legislators than you do. That fact by itself is not crazy. But now consider that fact remains and you are paying for the pleasure, quite literally, maybe twice. All right, so when I say that the major update, that there's no longer going to be a state department or agency that is working against civil asset forfeiture anymore, that is why I'm so excited about it. Because for so many years, the majority of the fight has been behind the scenes, not in subcommittee, not in committee, not with the legislators. The majority of the fight has been behind the scenes, primarily with Department of Safety and a few other folks. But now that we don't have to deal with that state agency, fingers crossed, I hope, that's why it's such a massive, massive update. You get what I'm saying? So, let me get to the bills that we're running this year. We're already at 20 minutes, so I'm going to try and wrap this up. But here's some of the bills that are running this year to hopefully try and alleviate some of the civil asset forfeiture problem. Now, many of you know this thing. We talked about that $350 bond requirement. You heard the story before, right? That they charge this per item seized. That guy had 3 cars that were taken, so they charged him for each car. So you're paying $1,000+ just to go to court, and then you have to hire an attorney on top of that. So if you click on this bill, it will take you to the bill itself. And again, if you didn't see the previous videos, I'll tell you how to read some of the stuff that you're seeing on the screen. But suffice to say that this bill, so if you go down to the bottom, it was introduced. You can then see it was assigned to Civil Justice Sub. This is all last year, by the way. Placed on Civil Justice Subcommittee. Then it was passed over there. then it went on up and it was passed on the other thing. Then it went all the way up here, and now we're actually stuck what's called behind the budget in finance, ways, and means. So the nice thing about this $350, this bill that removes that requirement to pay that $350 bond, Tennessee is one of only 3 states in the nation that requires that. The nice thing about this bill, as you see here, is that it's passed every major step in the House and Senate that's needed. It's just stuck behind the budget. And it's stuck behind the budget because if you go to the state website again, one of the things you always want to click on when you're tracking any of these bills, if you go to the state website, which is just capital.tn.gov, click on the fiscal note little button. And when you pull up that fiscal note, it'll actually show you here. You can see that big old honker of a number staring at you right now, $384,100. This number here. Anytime you see some of these numbers, decreased state revenue, this is essentially a signal to the fiscal folks to say, hey, you're going to cost the state a lot of money if you pass this bill. And so you have to find money to pass the bill. You have to fund this bill somehow. And it's stuck behind the budget, as they say, because it's not funded in Governor Lee's budget. That's a totally different conversation that I don't think we have time to get into right now. Suffice to say, if something is stuck behind the budget, Governor Lee didn't fund it. There's a very small pool of money that the finance Ways and Means Subcommittee has to find funding for your bill. So if they can't find this number right here, oh my goodness, where'd it go? There. If they can't find that number right there, even though your bill has already went through every step that it needs to go through, even though it's passed really well, if they can't find the funding, your bill doesn't actually become law. So anyways, that's where we're stuck with that one. It passed last year through every major step it needed to. It's going to remove the $350 bond requirement, as you heard was so problematic before. We just need to find funding. Here's another good bill. This is a reporting bill. It just adds basic information that we need to require, that we need to see information on. You heard me talk before about, some of the information that we don't have. Like, I don't know if there's reporting already on how often these things are being negotiated down. Maybe there is. I'll tell you something else we don't have information on, though. How often these civil forfeitures are ending in criminal convictions. That's a massive piece of information we need to know. So if I go into a legislator's office and I say, hey, we have a real problem in the state of Tennessee with people just taking their stuff and not being convicted of a crime. Well, the legislator could say, no, we don't. And I could say, yes, we do. And who knows who's correct? Refocus. Who knows in that conversation who's correct? Because unless I can have some kind of statistical data saying, hey, 84% of the time when you take these people's stuff, you're not actually convicting them of a crime, which means the overwhelming majority of the time you're taking innocent people's stuff. Give them their stuff back. If I don't have data to indicate that that's true or untrue, correct or not correct, then we have this cloud of ambiguity that we're having conversations in. And perhaps most importantly, the biggest bill of all, man, oh man, this one right here. Sorry, I didn't show you the other one. Here's the reporting bill. That's carried by Lafferty in the House. Chairman Bell. Bell is the chairman of the Justice Committee in the Senate side. That's going to be a good bill there. That's the reporting bill. Last bill, and perhaps most importantly for the civil asset forfeiture stuff, man, this one right here. This is the dream bill. We have this carried by Jerry Sexton in the House, and for the time being, Senator Stevens. That will probably that will change. The Senate sponsor will change, but it's a great bill right now, and I'll tell you why. This bill, man, this is the comprehensive overhaul of our entire forfeiture process in the state of Tennessee. This is the big one. This is the big, hairy, audacious bill one, right? It requires a criminal conviction before your property can be forfeited. It deals with this thing called an equitable sharing federal loophole, which again is we don't have time to get into it now. We can for later if you want to, but the short and sweet of it is some of these states are basically saying, hey, we won't charge you with a state crime, but we will charge you with a federal crime, and we'll just get around the state law by letting the feds run everything through us, and then we get to keep 80% of those forfeited funds. So you're just getting the feds to do your work for you. It deals with that as well. And it ends sort of the administrative court system, the process itself. But that big one here is called the Criminal Forfeiture Process Act. And the Institute for Justice is the preeminent institution in the entire United States for this issue. And this guy right here, Lee McGrath, he is the guy to help you with this. And Lee McGrath is helping us with this. Lee McGrath is the guy that essentially wrote this language here. This is a 25-page bill that we don't have time to go through right now, but I will tell you, this guy right here, Senior Legislative Counsel and Managing Attorney for the Institute for Justice, this guy, this is the guy. He wrote this bill. He's going to help us every step along the way. And the model is basically premised on these two things. Police and prosecutors should not profit from forfeitures. There should be no sort of like, I don't know, incentive there for police officers to do something nefarious. We shouldn't even put them in that position. Fund the police through a proper, transparent process. If you need the money, police, please let's give them the money. 2, an owner should be found guilty on a crime before the state takes final title to his property in criminal court. It is the best possible version of a forfeiture bill. It is the best possible version of a forfeiture bill. And I say that because Lee McGrath has indicated that every state that has done something positive along the way, Lee McGrath has updated and tweaked and changed and learned lessons. And he's the wisest guy in the entire nation on this issue as far as I'm concerned. He's helping us every step along the way. It is the best bill we could have right now. So there you go. 25 minutes, and it's a little bit too long of a video, but it is what it is. We're into it. Now you know what the civil asset forfeiture process is. Now you know a little bit of the testimonies to how we got there and what it looks like in the state. Now you know not only some of the updates coming from the Lee administration about the state agencies not fighting us on it, but you know why that isn't such an important update, which brings to an entirely new issue about there being taxpayer-funded lobbyists in Tennessee. We might do something about that one day. And lastly, you know about the 3 things we're trying to do. Getting rid of the $350 bond, giving us more reporting information, and a comprehensive overhaul of how we do the process. That's where I'll end it today. As you all know, I sign off every video. I love each and every one of y'all. I will see y'all very soon. Throw me some comments in the messages there. Whatever bills you want to talk about, we'll do that. See y'all later.